Okay, so this is a demonstration just to go over some of those key points that we had established last week. So collecting data was one. So what I'm going to show you now is the three systems, and that is lift and fold, scale and shape, and mold. And this is for the Batard, baguette, and the small rolls. And this is in the assessment. So data's collected. It's now the time for dough 1 to be lifted and folded, dough 2 to be scaled and shaped, and then dough 3 will be molded. So lift and fold. It's going to use a little bit of oil. And again, just got the dough here. I'm just going to let that fall out. You can do this in the bunker, and you can see that the dough actually is aerated. If I make a cut on the inside, you can actually see that there is gas production. Now, for this type of dough, which is bulk fermented, I'm using this lift and folding system to strengthen that glue. So just pulling over and join. Going to stretch it, flip that over, pull it again, over. You can see how that really makes this dough, I had mentioned about tension throughout the whole process. You know that we have this way of trapping gas, and it's sealed, and the dough is under tension through the whole process. So that is the lift and fold. You can see the difference. Actually, it's exactly the same dough, right? So you can see the difference between the dough that is now ready to scale and the dough that has had its first lift and fold. You can see the size is easily doubled. And that is the nature of fermentation. So just making sure that I've got a little bit of oil or flour on my bench and on my scales. Okay, so the dough doesn't then stick to anything. Turn that over. So for this, I want to make sure that I'm scaling in a way where I don't have too many pieces. And what I mean is that when I scale, I want to make sure that the dough pieces that I scale are made up of one piece of dough. So we're going with 4 pieces at 150. First, so here I've got 220. So I know I need, it's 150, not 450. So 150. So I've got 150 there. And this now gives me a bit of an idea of the size of dough that I need for the others. So I'm going to scale another one. Give a little bit more. And that gives you a little bit of a guide as to how big the pieces need to be for this baguette. So 4 pieces scaled at 150. Just place those there. And when you do this task, don't mold or shape anything until the whole dough has been scaled. So this, with bread making, you really want to make sure that all the scaling is done at once. All the shaping is then done at once. And that way you've got a bit more control on those dough pieces when it then goes into an intermediate proof, right? Because the dough pieces are consistently at the same stage, right? Oh, now I'm just going to do 9 for this task, just so this demonstration doesn't take too long. But in the assessment for this dough, this bulk fermented dough, you will be required to make 12 rolls. 2, 4, 6, 8. So in this case, with this dough, what happens to it? It goes into your next dough. We talked about that, about using fermented dough to then make better bread. So flour this time. Okay, do my baguettes first. Just going to make sure that my bunker has just a little bit of oil, just so that the bread pieces don't. All right. Over. And then over. Now make your shape, your batards, just a little bit of flour. This time I'm going to stretch it over. So I'm stretching the dough over and then stretching the dough back. And then I'm just making sure that through the whole process that I've got tension. Don't make them too long, because remember, we need to folding it over, then folding it over. So I've got tension. I'm just going to give it a bit of a roll. I'm not really rolling it, actually. I'm pushing with my thumbs underneath on that joint, and also the seam has to remain always on the bottom. Now, you can also do it this way. One side in, the other side in. Well, and the objective, again, is even. So over, squeeze, over, squeeze, and then over again. When I do that squeezing part, I'm just making sure that seam is connected. The rolls I do a little bit differently. So over, seam in the middle. I'm going to push with my thumbs, seam in the middle, push with my thumbs. I'm going to do this 3 times. So I've got good tension. The roll is already like in a shape for smaller torpedoes. Over. Push it in. I'm pushing in with my thumbs, then over again. Pushing in with my thumbs, and then over again. Seal. Over. 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 Whole concept of this type of bread. Remember, this is different to our other doughs. This one is about keeping as much gas bubbles in there as we can. We do want an irregular type of bubble structure inside the bread, where our other doughs that we've been making have quite fine texture. We would be moulding way more carefully. It sort of allows, this type of bread allows for some flexibility, yes? Just remember, certainly the rule for us is be consistent, right? Be consistent in your shapes, be consistent in the size. Over, over. It's a bit of a roll. Seam down. And then I'm ready now to let this have, and it's called an intermediate proof. So there is half an hour between each of these processes. So the lift and fold, let's come back. The dough comes off the machine. We take a dough temperature, we round that dough ball off, it goes in the bunker. We take a time that bread dough is starting its journey to the oven, and which is called dough time to oven, DTO. We then go half an hour in the bunker, bulk ferment, and then we give it a lift and fold. We give it another half an hour. We do this scaling process. So now I put the lid on and I would take the time now, and in half an hour, in 30 minutes, then the moulding starts. And you can see the difference in just half an hour between these two bread doughs, right? So this one I just have done the scaling and forming. This is not really moulding, this is just scaling and forming the shape. And you can see the expansion of that dough, and now I'm going to mould. So now I'm only using flour. And I'm going to use a tray. I've got my tray ready. I've also got the semolina, and I've got some flour. I guess the other tip too is that don't have too many things on your bench. So if you crowd it, it makes it very difficult to be able to have enough space to mould. So I'm going to go ahead and mould all of these bread rolls first. So I'll do the bread rolls, making sure that I don't have excessive flour, but there's enough flour there that I can do my moulding without it sticking to my hands or sticking to the bench. So just remember, a cupped hand. And then I'll start forming that torpedo over, squeeze. I'm squeezing back so I've got tension. Squeezing back. And then just roll the tips out. Give it a roll in semolina, making sure the seam is on the bottom. Over, pinch back. I'm sealing it. I'm putting my fingertips down and pushing back. Seal. And then when I roll, I'm rolling out. Don't really have to worry about the middle part because that is already formed. So, over, over, over. Let's roll the tips out. Over, over, over. I'm going to slow down that moulding on the last one. I'll just push these out. So just a bit of flour, not too much. But you can see where I am actually moulding is flour free, right? So the flour is just to enable us to mould this bread, but we definitely want it to be sticky, not sticky, but soft enough for it to be able to join. So also making sure that the top of the bread piece will be the top of the finished dough piece. What I mean by there's the seam there. This was sitting in the bunker face up. So then the seam sits on the bottom. Over, over, over. Just a roll. Over, over, over. I'm just pushing out. Over. Now, the semolina semolina is essentially just a larger particle of flour. And what that will do is it will encourage crust forming. So essentially it will dry out the surface because it's a bigger particle, it'll absorb more moisture. And therefore, and I will do that dusting again before it goes in the oven. So I'm just going to slow this down so you can see. In fact, I'm going to go to the other side. So over, and then I pinch and push back over. See how I'm forming that torpedo already? Over, and then on that last one, make sure that it's fully sealed. Then when I roll, I'm not really rolling. I'm actually just getting a grip of the dough. I don't want to flatten it. I'm getting a grip of the dough and I'm stretching it out to get those parts out. No moulding is done with pressure down. It is always either tension or stretching. You see the positioning as well, evenly distributed through the tray. Meaning that when they expand, they're not going to touch each other. They've got a lot of room on the tray to expand, but also when we bake, it's got the right airflow. Now we've got the batards. Well, essentially it's the same process again, but we're just making them longer. And the whole goal is to maintain as best we can as much of those little gas bubbles while still maintaining tension. Right? It has to have tension for it to do what we want. So there's the top of the dough piece that you can see here, and that then goes in the bottom. Cut my hand. I'm going to cup it. So I'm sealing down this part and this part. Going to pick it up, same process again. Pick it up, push back. Pick it up, push back. Pick it up, push back. So now I've got a dough piece that has been sealed. Now I'm going to do the ends. Don't really have to worry about the middle, right? It's just the ends. Roll that in semolina. And then even on the tray, just a bit closer. Even on the tray, if I can, actually still on. See, I get it nice and straight. I can reduce the size, I can make it longer. The goal is to make these 4 batards all equal in size and shape. So over, push back, pinch, seal. Got some nice big air bubbles in this one. Just going to roll. Semolina. And then do that final bit of shaping. Over. And last one. You notice I did the smaller pieces first. And now I'm doing the bigger pieces. And I do that job in a way that I start and finish that same job. I'm not stopping to scale anything or. And this is the 4 Batards. Okay, if it was a baguette, they would be a lot. Just make sure they're straight, seams are on the bottom, and then these will go into a proof. Remember, we've turned the humidity down to make it dry, and then we also turned the temperature down to slow it down. It's probably about half an hour in the proof, and then we'll go into a hot oven, 220, 230, 2 injections of steam. I will demonstrate the cutting of these when they are at their right proof for that scoring before baking.